What's up, guys? This is that's right. I'm doing this straight off the wake up. Ugh. I'm still pretty tired. I think I even might have to go poopies, but I can go poopies after this. I got commitments I gotta do. I want this to be one of my commitments. So today I wanted to read about I just wanted to kind of read about the political history of Texas, and it led me to this article from the Texas State Historical Association um, organization. They made an article. Um, this shit was published in 1996, and it was updated. Um, what is that? 19 years later? God damn. Robert A. Culver. I wonder if he's still alive. Probably is. Who knows? This article is called "The Transformation of Texas." It's from a rural to an urban to urban and industrial. Texas post World War II. Let's just hop into it. Texas post World War II. The last 5 decades of the 20th century witnessed the transformation of Texas from a rural and agricultural state to an urban industrial one. The changes caused new problems and exacerbated old ones for a population grounded in agrarian values. Two-party politics emerged as the state's electorate turned from a near absolute allegiance to its Southern Democratic heritage to one that frequently elected Republican office holders. The changing I don't know. I want to say demography. The changing demograph. Is it demography? It would have to be demography, right? Am I crazy? Demography, yes. The changing demography of the state intensified political rivalries. Mirroring national trends, Mexican Americans joined African Americans in demanding a more positive political response to the needs of minorities. The federal government abetted their cause through court decisions and legislations that struck down de jure segregation. De jure. That's a fun term. De jure. Oh, you're just not gonna. De jure segregation. Growing feminism, increasing opportunities in the marketplace, and the developing urban environment led many women to modernize and, in some cases, renounce the gendered political, social, and economic roles to which they had been traditionally prescribed. Interstate migrations also shaped a different Texas. The state's location in the emerging Sun Belt and its economic boom during the 1970s brought newcomers from outside the rural and southern traditions. These joined with intrastate migrants in large population centers and forced the legislator to address the needs of an urban society. Population statistics testified to the emergence of an industrial state. The census of 1950 recorded 7,711,194 Texans, a 20.2% increase over 1940. The population grew over the next several decades. to 9,579,677 in 1960, 11,198,655 in 1970, and 14,000,000 2,000 uh, 229,191 in 1980, 16,986,510 in 1990, and finally 20,851,820 in 2000s. Texas was the second most populated state in population in 2000, below only California. The economic boom in the late 70s and early 80s brought some of the spectacular growth. 500,000 immigrants moved to Texas between 1970 and 1975. 1 million more came over the next 5 years, and nearly a million more came in the early 80s. Expansion slowed due to a temporary economic downturn in the late 1980s, but quickly rebounded and continued through the end of the 20th century, driven by traditional strengths in oil, cattle, and agriculture, as well as by emerging strengths in healthcare, higher education, technology, and communications. The dominant migration pattern in post-war Texas was movement from the countryside to the city. Statisticians reported in 1945 that some 500,000 Texans left 200 rural counties to join the wartime industrial workforce in the 54 urban counties. The 1950 census failed to show an expected return of the workers to the farms, but reported that, for the first time in the state's history, more Texans lived in the city than in the country. In 2000, more than 82% of the state's population resided in urban areas, a figure that exceeded the national average. Houston grew from 384,504 inhabitants in 1940 to 1,953,631 in 2000. Dallas from 294,734 to 1,188,580. San Antonio from 253,854 to 1,144,646, and Austin from only 87,930 to 656,562. That's crazy. Austin is the least populated. Whereas Dallas is Houston is the most populated. Wow. That's crazy. The declining agricultural population marked a change in the nature of farming, both in Texas and in the nation. Most Texans would have identified farm bankruptcies, tenancy, and depressed crop prices. Oh no, ACAB, Texas and the nation. Most Texans would have identified farm bankruptcies, tenancy, and depressed crop prices as the major economic weaknesses besettling the state before World War II. New Dealers argued that farm policies that raised agricultural prices through planned scarcity would be the best method both to produce a disposable income for the population and to combat the Great Depression. Congress enacted legislation designed to establish party prices by reducing overproduction and bringing supply more in line with demand. This general policy, although with much political contentiousness, has remained the cornerstone of federal farm policy. One of its results was to drive marginal farmers and tenants off the land and into the city. State agencies and agricultural colleges endorsed the government's position and encouraged efficiency and mechanization as solution for farm woes. Agricultural statistics reflected the move from country to city, from small farms to vertical and horizontal agribusinesses. The farm population declined from 1,500,000 in 1945 to 215,000 in 1980. Number of farms from 384,977 to 186,000, and farm workers from 350,000, including part-time workers in the cotton fields, to 85,000. Jeez. During this period, the average farm size almost doubled to more than 700 acres, and the value of buildings and land per farm increased from $9,286 to $275,047. Even if inflation skewed the latter figures, they still revealed that the modern Texas farmer no longer tilled the small family farm that characterized the very recent history of the state. By 2000, fewer than 3% of Texans worked in agriculture, forestry, fishing, hunting, or mining. Although agriculture no longer dominated the Texas economy, farming remained an essential ingredient for prosperity. Some 20 to 25% of the population supplied, processed, or marketed agricultural products in the 80s, and their activities in the 1990s put $40 billion into the Texas economy. These traditional sources of income had held this position for most of the post-war years, with cotton holding the second spot and edging into first place only during the drought years 1954 and 1955. In the era of family farms, corn usually trailed cotton in acreage planted. In acreage planted? Area of land. Acreage. That makes more sense. Corn usually trailed cotton in acreage planted. But in the 1980s, grain sorghum and wheat vied for that distinction. Lightly cultivated cereal native to warm regions. Sorghum and wheat vied compete eagerly with someone in order to a wheat vie for that distinction. Overall, the state placed either second or third among states in the value of agricultural products during most of the period. Like most other agricultural states, Texas faced a farm crisis in the late 1980s. Increasing global agricultural competition and the high interest rates of the early 80s squeezed the American farmers. The resulting agricultural depression stimulated both state and national governments to reevaluate their farm policies. Nevertheless, agriculture continued to be a major societal social, economic, and political force in the state in Texas in the 21st century. World War II launched industrialization in Texas. The state's climate, its powerful leaders in the Democratic Party, and its abundance of petroleum encouraged the location of military posts, the growth of the construction business, the rise of defense industries, and the expansion of petrochemical facilities within its boundaries. Per capita income in the state more than doubled during the war to 1,234, or 85.2% of the national average, and the value added by manufacturing more than tripled to 1,727,400. Oh wait, 1 billion. Sorry, 727,000,000 47 476,000 dollars. Six northern states accounted for more than 50% of the nation's manufacturing value, and Texas was a distinct 12th. In the 1950s, Texans, 5.1% of the nation's population produced 2.3% of its goods. Industrial growth modified that. By 1990, Texas had 7% of the population of the United States, had 7% of the population of the United States, accounted for 7.4% of the gross national product, and employed one of every 11 of the country's workers. 1987 profile of the industry of the state. The state mirrored that of the nation. Trades and services provided almost 50% of the workforce. Government employed more than manufacturing. Together, the two hired nearly a third of the state's workers. Finance, insurance, and real estate, transportation and public utilities, construction and mining filled out the business base of Texas. Although the rate of inflation in the post-war economy confounded any simple method of calculating the state's real economic growth, the value added by manufacturing in 1984 dollars stood at 55,556,000,000 in 1984, where Texas was fourth among the states. When Texas was fourth among the states. The per capita income of Texans matched the national average in 1981 for the first time, but the downturn in the state's economy reversed the upward trend temporarily. Dude, how much do I have to fucking read there, actually? Holy shit, this is a lot. I underestimated how much I was getting into. Holy fuck. Holy fuck. And then it just ends. Okay. Oh my fucking god, bro. Fucking racial tensions. The Comptroller of Public Accounts. We'll keep going. The Comptroller of Public Accounts described the Texas economy of the late 1980s as being in a period of transition. The oil and gas industry, which had been probably the most important key to Texas economic growth, could no longer be counted upon to dominate future prosperity. Shipping, the most important key to Texas economic growth, could no longer be counted upon to dominate future prosperity. Oil production rose from 754,710,000 barrels in 1945 to 1,301,685 301,685,000 in 1972. Even though wells pumped at near capacity after that, production figures declined for several years. Entrepreneurs knew that they were dealing with a dwindling non-renewable resource. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries agreed to limit the supply of oil in 1973, and the price per barrel skyrocketed, overriding the impact of falling production. 9 years later, OPEC collapsed, the price of oil fell, and unemployment crept up. Oil and gas production accounted for 28% of the state's revenue in 1981 and 15% at the close of 1986. Energy-related industries, rigs, drillings, mud refining, employed 500,900 persons, or 1 out of every 12 non-farm workers in 1982. After that, those industries lost 282,000 jobs. Economists estimated that for every job in the oil industry, another 3.7 disappeared in other economic sectors. The 1986 slump in construction, rise in office vacancies, decline in housing starts, and general economic gloom verified their judgments during the late 80s. Despite estimates that the state still had 1.263 billion barrels of proven and 7.9 billion barrels of unproven oil reserves, or 25% of the nation's total, state leaders such as the comptroller warned that never again would petroleum products lead automatically to economic growth. No one discounted the value of oil or denied that the state might still attract new industries and settlers. But by stressing economic diversity, the leaders of Texas seemed to turn away from the historic practice of encouraging prosperity through raw material production. They now looked to building upon the industries that oil and defense spending helped produce. It appeared that the Gone to Texas booms based on cotton in the 1870 and oil in the 1970 had been likely replaced with the slow, gradual growth of the service and trade sectors that characterized other urban industrial states. Such forecasts proved premature. However, as the state's oil industry continued to experience booms and busts into the 21st century, reaching staggering production levels approaching 5 billion barrels of Texas crude production per day by 2019. Sorry. Racial tensions continued to plague Texas throughout the post-war years and into the 21st century. The various civil rights movements, coupled with the development of industries, slowly mitigated some of the more visible effects of lingering inequality. African Americans comprised 11.6% of the state's population in 1990, down somewhat from the percentage reported in 1945. Duplicating national migration trends, the majority of black left farms The majority of black left farms and settled in urban areas. The majority of blacks left farms and settled into urban areas. The black left farms, sorry, yeah. Um, they soon constituted more than 20% of the population of such cities as Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Beaumont, and Waco. Wait, when was this? Okay. The urban environment allowed more freedom for civil rights groups to demand that the Jim Crow system end. 1951 and 1953, the federal courts extended the Smith v. Allwright decision to include local primaries and black people who paid the poll tax. And black people who paid the poll tax could vote in all Texas elections. See election laws. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the United States Supreme Court decision in 1966 that struck down the poll tax eliminated barriers to suffrage. Black voter registration in Texas rose from 35.5% of the voting age population in 1960 to 59.1%. In 1984, the Supreme Court's one man, one vote ruling, which forced state legislators to redistrict, aided voters in 1966 in electing Barbara Jordan of Harris County to the state Senate and Curtis Graves of Houston and Joseph Lockridge of Dallas to the House. They were the first blacks since 1898 to serve in the state legislature. In 1985, 260 blacks held elected office in Texas, including a United States Congressman, Mickey Leland, a state senator, and 13 members of the state house. The struggle for black social equality went hand in hand with the demand for suffrage. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People undertook a campaign in 1945 to challenge separate school systems in the federal courts. Heman M. Sweat of Houston agreed to sue the University of Texas School of Law for admission on the grounds that the state offered no professional school training for its black citizens. See Sweat v. Painter. The state's leadership attempted to thwart black requests for equal opportunities by broadening the educational programs at Prairie View A&M. By starting an all-black law school in Austin, and by incorporating Texas State University for Negroes, now Texas Southern University, into the state school system. Sweat's case went to the United States Supreme Court, which ruled in 1950 that the black law school could not compare to the University of Texas and ordered the admission of Sweat. The integration of other public colleges soon followed. Honestly, I should read more about just like Jim Crow law cases. Like, it seems very interesting to the sort of legal battles that would have been back and forth in courts to establish that we would take for granted very minute rights for black people. But I mean, it was a time where people were kind of denying black people a lot of just basic shit. So in Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, the Supreme Court ruled that segregated public schools were intrinsically unequal and consequentially unconstitutional. Dude, it's so fucking long. You just text me. God, I'm such a phone junkie. I hear buzz. I check. Where are we at? Okay. I might read Should we end with the Brown v. Board? Oh God, and they get into so many female. Okay, yeah, this will be the last one we read. In Brown v. Board in Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, the Supreme Court ruled that segregated public schools were intrinsically unequal and consequently unconstitutional. Governor R. Allen Shivers, whoever the fuck, announced his opposition to the decision, but his rhetoric did not embody much of the bitter racism that characterized many of the other southern states. He used the Texas Rangers at Mansfield in 1956 to prevent black students from entering the school. Mansfield school desegregation incident, and supported the segregation laws that the legislature passed the next year. But his successor, M. Price Daniel Sr., did not enforce these laws, and the massive resistance and violence that marred Southern history and later erupted in such places as Massachusetts did not sweep Texas. The move to integrate the public school system was, however, a slow and painful process. Many communities evaded integration through redefining school district boundaries and appealing court desegregation orders. By 1964, only 18,000 of the state's 325,000 black students attended predominantly white schools. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 allowed the withdrawal of federal funds from segregated school districts. However, the rate of integration increased. Further, Supreme Court decisions in 1969 and 1971 instructed school districts to stop evading real compliance with the Brown decision and approved busing as a means of desegregation. Black Texans also fought to bring down other Jim Crow barriers that existed after World War II. Aided by federal court decisions, African Americans gained the use of such publicly owned facilities as golf courses, restrooms, and beaches in most Texas cities by the mid-50s. In 1954 and 1956, the Interstate Commerce Commission Supreme Court ruled against segregation on buses. Cafeterias and bus stations, airports, and federal and municipal agencies were desegregated by the end of the decade. The concept of nonviolent sit-ins that began in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1960 soon spread across the South. Students at Wiley and Bishop colleges in Texas staged demonstrations that year, protests, boycotts, and picketing at restaurants and theaters by blacks and their white allies in Austin, Houston, San Antonio, and other cities caused voluntary desegregation by 1963 of most private businesses. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, supported by President Lyndon B. Johnson and Senator Ralph Yarborough, and 5 state acts that dismantled Jim Crow legislation in 1969, ended legal segregation in Texas. Though the peaceful demonstrations of the early civil rights movement turned to Black Power protests that hardened the attitudes of some whites against black equality, the riots and violence that occurred elsewhere infrequently happened in Texas. In 1967 at Texas Southern University, and in 1970 at the People's Party second headquarters in Houston, blacks clashed with the police over the issue of harassment in the ghettos. These unfortunate incidents reinforced African Americans' perceptions that the local establishment, particularly the police, were not willing to accept equal rights. Much of the energy that went into ending legal barriers in the 50s and 60s turned to demands for more minority officials and larger share and larger what was I? Much of the energy that went into ending legal barriers in the 50s and 60s turned to demands for minorities officials and a larger share of the nation's economic riches. Though the number of minority members of police forces, including a black chief of police in Houston, had grown by the late 1980s, blacks had not achieved equal income. The median income of black families was 14,808 in 1985, or 3/5 that of whites. That's 3/5, bro. That's crazy. That's crazy. But what is I mean, I do want to let me 14, let's say 3/5 is like 60%. So we'll do, oh shit, 14,000 14,808 times 0.60. No, because I'm dumb. That's not how you do that would be 60% of, if I did, would it just be 60? No, I'm just gonna do 3 divided by, no, because then that's just, no, yeah, that would just make it, how do I, dude, I literally just learned this in my fucking math class. How do I figure out that 14 is 60%? 60% of what? This is what happens when you cheat in your math class too much. I'm not ending the recording until I solve this. Hold on. 60. Is it just 60? I mean, no, Sean. 60% increase. No, because the 14,000 is the 3 out of the 5ths. So it's figuring out, maybe if I divide it by 0.60, right? Is that how that works? Because it gave me 24,000. What if I did? Oh. Yeah. Maybe it was just dividing it by 60.60. I'm so dumb. And then yeah, that would be 60%. Oh, okay. That may, yeah. All right, cool. So we're making 14,000, whereas whites were making 24,000. Damn, it's just a $10,000 bonus. Anyways, thank you for reading with me. I should wake up and read more. It's much more beneficial for me. I love it. You have a great day though. I love you. Bye.